Good afternoon. How's everyone feeling? Ready to take action? Yes? A couple of familiar faces, so that's good. My name is Henrik, and I will take you through the next couple of hours, where the idea is to give you a bit of some insights on what it takes to be an entrepreneur, what it means to work in a startup company. And for those of you who already have ideas, we will sort of go into some of the details on how to then bring those ideas to life. So that's the goal. We'll talk about a lot of different aspects of your entrepreneurial journey. And my objective is to help share some of the failures or some of the mistakes that I've made, so you don't have to make the same mistakes. You can go and make some other mistakes. Because you will make mistakes inevitably throughout your entrepreneurial journey. That's what it's all about. But entrepreneurs like to fail fast and then learn from those mistakes and then do it better next time. In the startup world, we talk about how failing faster is failing cheaper. Right, so the faster you can realize that you're working on solving a problem that no one has or building a product that nobody wants to use, the better. Because then you can quickly move on to building something that is actually creating value for your customers and working on a company that makes sense. So very briefly about myself, from Denmark originally, started 2 companies in college. One of them crashed and burned, the other one was moderately successful. Then after sort of graduating as an engineer, moved to Silicon Valley in 2010 to be part of the startup ecosystem in Silicon Valley. As you might have heard of, Silicon Valley fosters a lot of new tech companies, and it's an interesting place to be as an entrepreneur because there's so much innovation happening. There's so many like-minded people who are all trying to change the world in one way or another. There's a lot of capital available to entrepreneurs, and it's just overall a pretty exciting place. So what I'm trying to bring now to different universities and startup accelerators around the world is some of the best practices when it comes to starting companies. So what I've learned throughout my own entrepreneurial career and from what I've seen from my friends and colleagues in Silicon Valley. So I work today with a bunch of different universities in 25 countries around the world. I work with accelerators, and I work with a bunch of larger companies like Intel and Siemens and Twitter and other companies that are sort of interested in hiring entrepreneurial employees. Just today I read an article about how all big companies have a CEO, like a chief executive officer. And today, in order to not get left behind, you need to employ a chief entrepreneur or in residence, or a chief entrepreneurship officer. So it's like one of those concepts that are becoming increasingly popular, that large companies, in order to innovate and not be left behind, also need to adopt these entrepreneurial principles. Because the world is changing faster and faster. We have exponential technologies that are basically propelling humanity forward faster and faster. And in order not to be left behind, we all need to be entrepreneurial in one way or another. So that's why all these principles, whether you're going to start your own business or not, will still apply, hopefully. Good. So I wanted to hear more about who you are and where you're at today. How many of you are working on a startup right now? How many of you are full-time on that company? Okay. You're working full-time for your startup? Yes. Yes? Okay. Good. How many, again, was working on a startup today? Okay, about a handful. Okay. And how many of you are aspiring entrepreneurs and have good ideas that you want to take action on? So what's holding you back? Why have you not started working on it yet? This seminar. We're starting today. Okay, good. But what has been some of the challenges you feel like so far? Direction? Yeah, it's just like where to start. Yeah. You don't know if it works or not, right?
That's why the seminar was the title of it.
Yeah.
Was how you wanted to come.
Good. So that's why you're here. How many of you are familiar with what's called lean startup? Have heard of lean startup? 2, 3 people? Okay. How many of you actually read the book? None of you? Yeah? Okay. So the lean startup is one of those things we'll touch on today, which is essentially a really effective framework on how to quickly validate and test whether the idea you have has any real potential. Right? So as an entrepreneur, you might have a ton of different ideas. And the big question is, which one of those ideas should you pursue? So as entrepreneurs, we want to very quickly figure out whether an idea has real potential. and then figure out, well, how do we then go about bringing this idea to life? And as you have realized, there's so many different aspects on starting a business. So where do we start? Should we start by raising funding? Should we start by contacting investors and try to put together a pitch? Should you start by building the product for the next 6 months or a year? Start with market validation. Yeah, so maybe we should start by talking to customers. What does that look like? How do we talk to customers? How do we find them? How should we structure our interviewing scripts? Welcome everyone. And all of that stuff, right? So there are so many aspects of starting a business, and today I will try to kind of break down some of all these complex questions and figure out what is sort of the roadmap for your startup journey and how do you go about taking action in the most efficient way. So we have a bunch of different themes and topics we could talk about, and this will take more than 2 hours. So this is sort of what you're going to experience today is a very condensed version of this 2-day workshop called the Startup Experience that some of you have signed up for, which we're doing this coming weekend. And if you're interested in taking part of that, at some point we will do it again in September. So those of you who didn't make the cut this time or haven't seen it before now, then try to apply in September, where we'll dive into more of these things. But essentially, as an entrepreneur, there are infinite amount of different things you need to be good at. And that's what makes it exciting, but also what makes it really challenging. Because you need to be a good leader, you need to be a strong communicator, you need to be a good team player, good at doing marketing for your startup, good at doing product development, good at doing sales, customer relations, HR. There's like so many different things that you need to manage. And in a small startup team, we don't have specific resources allocated for all these different tasks. So you need to be the ones wearing all those different hats. Hopefully in your startup team, you're like 2, 3, 4 people, something like that. So you don't have to do everything yourself. But if you're a solo founder, which some of you might be, at least initially, you will need to have to do all those different things. And that's also why when you're looking for a co-founder, you want people who are very independent and sort of self-starters, because you cannot really start a company with somebody that you need to micromanage, right? You need to have to work with people who see a problem, they go fix it, right? Because you need to be the ones assembling the furniture, taking out the trash, picking up the phone, talking to customers, building the product, doing marketing, working on the website, publishing the app, calling partners up, figuring out the revenue model, figuring out distribution channels. There are like so many different tasks, and all the times you just need to fix things pretty urgently. And if you are working with people that you need to micromanage and tell what to do, then they might be really great employees, but they might not be good co-founders. So you need to find people who have this kind of self-starting mentality that just see a problem, they go fix it right away. So what I had in mind today was we'll focus on some of these aspects up here, which is really around how to get started initially. We'll talk about the importance of having a good business model and how to go about building a business model and then testing it later on. So it's very much in relation to sort of some of these questions you're wrestling with. Well, what do I do when I have an idea? What are the first steps? So try to make that more tangible. And then we'll go into greater detail also about, so after you tested it and you found out there is an opportunity here, how do you then go about really bringing it to life, and where should you start? I want to make sure that this is, that I communicate this is supposed to be very sort of casual interaction. So if you have a question or a comment anytime, please just interrupt. And it's not just going to be me talking today, it's going to be you doing. So we're going to actually start 5 or 6 new companies in the next 2 hours. So in here, so we'll basically form you into teams, and then we'll get some hands-on stuff going as well. But how does that sound? Good? All right. And if anything else that you really want me to touch upon today, please just let me know, and I'll try to expand on it. First of all, what is a startup? Steve says a startup is a temporary organization. So eventually you're going to grow up to become a company. But right now you're a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So your only purpose in life as a startup founder is to search. It is not to execute, it is to search. Because right now there's so much unvalidated or invalidated risk. Right? There are a lot of different things that we don't know yet about this company, and it would be foolish to start building the product today, because we might be building the wrong thing. So the whole sort of thinking around lean startup is really to eliminate uncertainty through validated learning. So right now everything is uncertain. We don't know who the customers are. We don't know what problem they have, what problems they have. We don't know what they care about the most. We don't know what product features would satisfy the needs for these customers. We don't know which partners we need to build this product and to deliver it. We don't know which distribution channels are the most efficient, what the cost structure would be, what the revenue streams might look like. All these different things that are uncertain. So that's why we focus our time on searching for answers to all these different questions instead of building the product. Later on, we will start executing. Another important aspect, and I do want to spend just a few minutes on this, is that there is a difference between a high-growth startup and what we categorize as an SME or as a lifestyle business. And the reason why I spend a little more time about this is that we tend to glorify high-growth startups. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, we typically talk about high-growth startups. But there is a fundamental difference between those two types of companies. And many of you might be starting what we call an SME or lifestyle business. And that's totally fine. You will actually be able to have a life while starting a lifestyle business or starting an SME. Whereas if you're going for a high-growth company, high-growth startup, we're talking 100 hours a week for the next 5 to 10 years. And you will have to sacrifice everything, right? You might also have a shot at becoming a billion-dollar company and be known around the world and basically change your industry if you go this route. But it's also way, way, way harder and way, way, way riskier. So the reason why I bring this up is also that if you have co-founders in your business, it's very important to align expectations around what type of company we're starting. What is the number one reason startups fail? Arguments between co-founders, yes. That's the number one reason. It's not because you couldn't raise funding. It's not because you couldn't build the product or you somehow weren't able to deliver on time or anything like that. It's because an argument escalated into a big discussion that escalated into a huge fight, and at the end of the day, people were just like, I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work with you anymore. Never want to see you for the rest of my life, and then the company dies. So if you can eliminate some of those potential or avoid some of those potential conflicts, that will be really valuable. Communication in a startup team is super, super important. So aligning expectations about the type of company you're building is one of the first steps, right? You need to have a very clear agreement on, are we working 100 hours a week and skipping weekends and skipping family vacations? Or are we sort of trying to build a company while at the same time having reasonable hours? And it's okay to take a vacation, it's okay to have kids, it's okay, other different things, right? So those are two really important things. The other thing is, when you're starting a business, one big decision is, of course, are we going to have to raise capital for this type of company, or can we grow more organically? And if you're in this kind of category, right, you can start sort of small. You can start simply by building a product that has the minimum amount of features, and maybe you're self-funded, what we call bootstrapped. So when you're bootstrapping a company, you don't take capital from investors. You basically try to invest your own savings and just live on ramen and oatmeal out of your mom's basement for as long as possible. So you don't spend unnecessary capital on fancy offices and equipment if you can just stay lean. So staying lean is pretty popular now in startup circles. Try to spend a minimum amount of money as possible. And then you can slowly start getting a couple of customers, and when you get more customers, more revenue, you can start hiring more employees, you can deliver more products, spend more money on advertisement, and slowly you just have this kind of linear growth, right? What we call organic growth. So you're just basically powering your growth through revenue. And that's great. But if you are going for a different type of company where you want world domination, right? Or if you're in one of these industries that we call winner-takes-all industries, what are some of those examples? Like an example of a winner-takes-all industry.
Would it be the NBN?
What's that?
Would it be the NBN?
The NBN? Yeah, tell me more about that. How would that?
Well, at the moment, the government's paying out contracts, I think.
Uh-huh.
They're doing tenders, and then people go for it, and they bid. Whoever gets the highest gets it.
Yeah.
And Telstra got it at the moment.
And they only allow a few companies to operate in that space?
I think there's 2 networks being built at the moment. The first company got the big tenders, so they've got like $800 million more than the other one.
Yeah, so some of these kind of, so infrastructure, energy, production are typically sectors where there's only a few players, also because there's tremendous sort of barriers of entry. It's very expensive to even get started. But other industries could be...
Casino industry.
Casino? Oh, yeah, okay, so that could be another one. Yeah, so simply like this legislation only permits a couple of players.
Google search?
Google search, yes. Or like search as an industry. Yeah. It's a winner takes all because you only use sort of one search engine typically. Some people use 1 or 2 or 3, but most of us use Google as the go-to search engine, so they sort of won that war by being simple and fast and reliable. So that's a good example. Yeah. Another one is kind of online sales, which...
Third-party payment.
What's that?
Third-party payment.
Third-party payment is also an industry that doesn't have a ton of different players. It probably has like 10 different fairly large ones, like PayPal and Stripe and Square and several others. But yeah, not like an infinite amount of players. But Amazon is obviously the big ones in online sales, right? Uber is the big one in the taxi industry. Lyft is trying to outcompete them in certain markets, but if you go here in Australia, then it's Uber, right? If you want an alternative to taxis, it's Uber. And it's really hard for another company to now launch an app. Not because it's technically that difficult to build that app, but it's just getting people to now convert and start using something else if they're fairly happy with their existing alternative. So if you're in a winner-takes-all type of industry, you might have to go this route. And you might have to focus on growth extremely aggressively as opposed to trying to reach profitability fairly soon. Most companies that are in these types of industries, they need to spend the first 4, 5, 6 years on growth rather than trying to reach profitability, right? Uber, are they profitable? No, they're losing billions of dollars, right? They're spending billions of dollars every year trying to just grow extremely aggressively. So if you're in that kind of space, you need to, and again, that's taking on a lot more risks. They might be able to reach profitability they would have been able to reach profitability much earlier, but then they would have sacrificed growth. So these types of companies, they focus on growth more than anything else. And they raise a ton of money, so they don't need to worry about becoming profitable soon. All they need to have to worry about is growing more aggressively, acquiring a ton of customers. That's what this is about, right? So I hope I sort of painted a picture that these are just 2 different types of companies where you need to raise a lot of money. And what do you give away when you raise money? Equity. And when you give away equity, you give away power and control, right? So all of a sudden now, after a couple of rounds of funding, who's in charge? The investors are, right? Or your board of directors are. So you could get fired from your own company. That sucks, right? But it's just one of the things to also take into consideration that when you're starting a business and you take on a lot of venture capital, you start giving away power and control of your own business. And that means that now you have a board of directors who are constantly looking over your shoulder, making you grow faster and faster and faster, because what do the investors care about? Return on investment, right? Yeah, they care about profit, or maybe not profitability right now, but they want their money back. Not just with a 10% interest rate. No, they want their money back tenfold, right? Or 100-fold. So they're going to make you run faster and faster and faster. And that might also create a lot of stress. So I just want to make sure that it's okay to be this type of entrepreneur. This is awesome, right? You're in control. You can decide what markets you enter, how fast you're growing, who you're doing business with, how small you want to keep the team, and all that stuff. And you can easily have a good $1 million business in a lifestyle company. It's just not as scalable or not as growing as fast as a company that's doing a high growth startup. But for both of these businesses, when we're talking about startups, even if it's sort of more of an SME type business, we're still talking about companies that are somewhat scalable. At least in this sort of class today, we're focused on startups, not on consulting businesses. Or, I mean, you can apply the same principle or the same frameworks to a certain degree, but today we'll talk more about companies that can eventually scale. So companies where you are removing yourself from the money-making equation. Right? As an employee, the money-making equation is that time equals money. So the amount of money you make is dependent on how much time you put in. If you want a somewhat scalable business, you need to take yourself out of that equation. So time doesn't equal money anymore. Right? That's when we start seeing scalability, when you build some kind of product that can be adopted by thousands of customers, and you can grow that somewhat exponentially without having to hire an equal amount of additional people. Okay, so it's time to get started here. In every kind of startup, we need a good startup team. A good startup team needs generally at least 3 types of people. We need a hacker, a hustler, and an artist. So I'm going to now go through these 3 entrepreneurial personas, and I'm going to ask you to self-identify with one of these 3 roles. And you can only pick one today. The hacker is a strong technical person doing the back-end technology, so making sure everything works behind the scenes. Typically have a strong passion for technology, making sure things work. And I mean, the kind of kid who always wants to take things apart and try to put it back together again. The hustler is that guy or girl who can pick up the phone and sell anything to anyone at any time for any price. Right? Never takes no for an answer. Is always very proactive about building network, creating connections, overcoming any kind of obstacles. Good at recognizing trends and typically figuring out a way to make money. The artist is both, can be quite technical as well, but the artist is more focused on the front-end design of the product. So if we're looking at an app or a website or something like that, they would be taking care of the front end, looking at the user interface and the user experience. So what does the product feel like? What are the different buttons on my hardware product? Or on a website, what is the flow that I use to kind of navigate throughout the app? What are the color scheme and all those different things? So those are the 3 core types. So now we're shortly going to go into sort of idea generation. Entrepreneurs are essentially problem solvers. Most people around the world look at all these big problems we have and they just say, well, who am I to solve these big problems? Good entrepreneurs focus on understanding the problem first before they start really building the product or developing too many ideas around the solution. So now we're going to jump into a quick little session here on basically an exercise called New Tech Meets Big Problem. The type of startup idea that you're going to be challenged to come up with today in the next 5 minutes is that we will look at, so it's basically in your teams, we're going to come up with a new startup idea in the next 5 minutes. Okay, a new billion-dollar idea. And your challenge is that the problem you're trying to solve is something related to health. And that's very broadly defined. So you and your team can quickly agree on, well, are we doing mental health for senior citizens? Are we doing physical health for teenagers? What specific type of condition are we dealing with? It's pretty broad. So it's up to you to sort of look at, well, what kind of aspect of health do we want to focus on? And then the other aspect is that you need to use some kind of IoT, some kind of Internet of Things technology. Internet of Things is basically an umbrella term for this fact that everything is getting connected. Your scale in your bathroom is now online, so you can get data on how your weight sort of varies over time, and maybe it's directly connected to your fridge. So when you gain 2 pounds, the drawer for your ice cream will automatically shut off, right? Or maybe you have an intelligent fridge, so it will tell you when the milk is getting too old or you run out of butter, so it automatically add that item to your shopping list. Maybe you have an intelligent thermostat at home, or maybe you have some kind of what we call quantified self technologies, so different types of tracking mechanisms. Here we have a picture of an older gentleman here who has a heart rate monitor that's sending data in real time to his doctor or to some kind of monitoring service, so that if anything goes wrong, they will get notified in time. So quantified self is looking at all these different technologies that allows us to get data so we can make better decisions and become more proactive about changing our health habits. So it's basically up to you what kind of aspect of IoT you want to use. But in the next 5 minutes, you need to come up with $1 billion idea that uses an Internet of Things technology to address a need in health. And after those 5 minutes, you need to define clearly what is the problem, who's the user, what is your solution, and how are you making money? Alexander Osterwalder, a PhD from Switzerland, came up with this framework for a business model canvas. And he wrote a book called Business Model Generation, where he sort of describes this framework and how to use it. Later on, that has been sort of the go-to standard in entrepreneurship education when it comes to lean startup and customer development. So Steve Blank and this other guy who's really famous for writing the lean startup book called Eric Ries, and others, Ash Moray, and all of these sort of lean startup gurus are now using this business model canvas as a tool to test out and describe and validate your business model in a really quick way. So for those of you who are not familiar with this framework, how many of you have come across the business model canvas before? Okay, not that many. So here's a short little video describing what it is, and then I'm going to show you a modified version of this framework that we're going to be using tonight.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
Pretty cool, right? It's a lot more fun than writing a 50-page or 100-page long business plan. So this really powerful framework has been adopted by entrepreneurs and students and larger corporations that are trying to push innovation all over the world, because it allows you to sketch out all the different aspects of your business in a very short amount of time and get an overview of how everything is connected. And then you can start testing all these different aspects of your business before you actually build the product. Figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve, why is that important, why should we care? Who are the users and the customers? We might want to try to differentiate between who are customers, or people who pay us something in return for using our product, and we have users who might be freemium users. What are types of companies that have freemium users? Spotify, yeah. So you can use it for free. Why would you ever pay to become a paying customer then?
No ads.
No ads. So you can remove the ads by upgrading yourself to become a paying customer. Yeah.
Actually, that's a lot of things. A lot of music streaming,
A lot of these types of companies, a lot of social media stuff, a lot of games, a lot of, yeah. So a lot of different businesses have users who have freemium, don't pay you anything in return, and then customers. And you need to, of course, figure out what are the different groups of people here. How do we create value for both groups? How many users can we afford to have, depending on the conversion rate and the cost of acquisition and the cost of having these freemium users, because they also cost you money. If we look at a business like Dropbox, how many people use Dropbox? How many people pay to use Dropbox? You're welcome, guys. I'm essentially sponsoring all of the freemium users in here, right? So many businesses have a lot of freemium users, and they have to pay for you, right? It costs something to have those servers up and running. You can call customer support just like I can, right? But you're not paying them anything in return. So how many freemium users can you afford to have as a business? Who are the early adopters? So early adopters are the people who will be the first to start using your product. And there are a couple of different key characteristics of early adopters. Early adopters are people who have a problem, right? But they also know that they have a problem. They have sort of realized that, hey, this is actually really annoying. This is a pain for me. And they are also trying to find a solution for it. So they're actively trying to find a solution. They have a problem, they know they have a problem, and they're actually trying to find a solution. There are a lot of people out there who have problems that they don't know of, right? And there are also people who have a problem, they might know of it, but it's not a big enough problem for them to look for a solution. Right? We all know that some of those annoying things in our life that, yeah, they're sort of frustrating, but they're not a big enough pain to us that we would actively go online to try to find a product that would solve that for us, right? So the early adopters are some of those individuals who really are keen to look for a solution. They will be the first ones to start using you. And you need to find out what is that group of customers, because that's where we're going to enter the market. There's no point in for us to try to sell to, there's a framework called the diffusion of innovation curve, where it highlights how there are early adopters and innovators who are the first ones who would use your product. Then we have early majority, late majority, and laggards. Those are different groups of customers that you will later on start catering to, but right now you simply don't have the resources to sell to those people who don't really are desperate for a solution. So we need to find out who are the people who will be the first customers for us. Okay, what is our solution? So how are we solving this problem? What are the key features of our product? In a startup, we can't do everything, so we need to be very specific about the few features that we will integrate in our product. What are the channels that you will use to interact with your customers? So how do people hear about you? And later on, how do you distribute your product from your warehouse to the hands of the customer? What are your revenue streams? So how are you making money? How much are you charging? How are you charging? Is it a one-time transaction, or is it a subscription business? Subscription model where you have a weekly or monthly or annual subscription fee? How much are people willing to pay? What are your costs for setting up this business, for getting it up and running? What are your fixed costs in terms of manufacturing capacity or manufacturing equipment, if you have any of that? What are your sort of more variable costs in terms of manpower that you can scale up and down on? It would be good to have an idea of your break-even point. I don't expect you to have that today, but later on. What is your unique value proposition? So what is the unique aspect about your business that make people come to you as opposed to go to all the competitors? Most businesses navigate in a fairly competitive environment, so you need to be very clear about what sets you apart. What makes you better than all the others? So you need to have a unique, differentiated value proposition. What is your unfair advantage? So what makes your team incredibly well positioned to bring this idea to life? Right, so what is the unfair advantage that you have? Do you have access to specific resources? Do you have industry experience or insights like no one else? You've worked in this industry for 40 years and you've now uniquely positioned to start this company. Maybe you have access to a tremendous amount of capital, or maybe you have other types of skills. So figure out what is your unfair advantage, and obviously investors will look at this. And then lastly, what is the impact? Not all businesses have that, but if you have it, it will be good to be able to articulate that. But essentially today it was just to sort of give you a little bit of a taste of what this type of framework can do for you. So when you have an idea, that you try to sort of attack it in a systematic way. Instead of just trying to describe certain aspects of it, trying to map out and get a full overview of how these different things are connected. And then you can essentially prototype a business idea in 45 minutes or an hour. And in that short amount of time, you actually have a pretty good idea of how the different critical aspects of your business, what that looks like. And you will be able to sit down with a mentor, an experienced entrepreneur or an advisor or an investor, and kind of try to talk through some of these critical aspects of your idea. What we then need to realize is that what we have here is really just a list of guesses. There are no facts in this room whatsoever. There's no truth inside here, this room. All the facts are outside the building. So that's why we very quickly, after we just have prototyped our business, we need to get out of the building and start talking to customers. And people tend to postpone this way too long. You will immediately start working on your product and you ask yourself, can we build it? Instead of asking yourself, should we build it? These are the two main types of risks that we have in a startup. Can we build it or should we build it? Which one is riskier? Should we build it? Because there's so much technology available today. You can build pretty much anything, right? If there's a real need for it, we can probably build it. And I bet a guy like Steve or Elon Musk has launched SpaceX, right? How crazy is that? And that's still possible. Now they're recycling rockets, space rockets, and going to Mars, right? So I bet your idea is also doable, if that's doable. Am I right? So of course, there can be critical things, and certain things are really hard, but typically it's much, much, much riskier whether you should build it as opposed to whether you can build it. But we, especially as engineers, we tend to focus on can we build it right now and eliminating the technology risk instead of trying to eliminate the market risk. And that's a mistake. And I'll tell you more about how and why that is. But essentially what we do is we fill it out, this type of canvas. We then realize that all we have is a list of guesses. And what we need to realize now or need to identify are the riskiest assumptions that we're making about this business. We're making a lot of different assumptions. We're assuming that these people have this problem. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're perfectly happy with the status quo. So they wouldn't buy a product even if you build it, and then there's no point in building it. We're assuming that they would pay X amount for this solution that would solve this problem for these people. Maybe they don't want to pay that amount. Maybe it won't be feasible to build it. We're assuming that we can reach these people through these channels, but maybe we can't. Maybe they don't listen to our ads and all that different stuff. So we need to test all these risky aspects of our business. So entrepreneurship is an extreme sport in the sense that most people think it's like a linear straight line from idea to billion-dollar business, but reality is that you need to go through many different hoops before you have something that actually creates value for people. An interesting thing to keep in mind is sort of like the life cycle of an entrepreneur, also to get you a little bit of a picture of the type of journey you're about to start. This is borrowed from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, the most famous startup accelerator in the world, the ones that started back in the days. And they're sort of looking at the happiness level for your startup. When you set out to start a company, the happiness level is sort of average, right? What happens then? The day when you decide you're going to start a business, you're going to pursue your dream.
Very happy.
It goes up, right? Yeah, you're happy, you're excited. Everyone comes over and congratulates you. You're going to change the world, man. It's going to be amazing. And then what happens inevitably on day 2? Yeah, boom. Reality sets in, right? You realize this is going to be way harder. It's going to be way more expensive than what you initially envisioned. So now you go through 2 years of what we call the trough of sorrow. This miserable time in an entrepreneur's life where you're desperately trying to find something that makes sense, something that works, something people care about. And most startups die in this stage because people give up, or they run out of money, or they just simply cannot do this anymore. Too bad. But for a selected few, something starts working someday. And then finally, customers actually start using our product, and they keep coming back, and some of those few customers are willing to pay us money for it. Exciting stuff. Some of those startup projects actually manage to find what we call product market fit, where you're building something people want and they're willing to pay you money for that type of product. And that's a very exciting time in an entrepreneur's life where everything changes. All of a sudden, the investors are lining up to invest in your company. And you can start becoming selective about who you want to invest in your company, and you start moving from searching to execution. Because now we know what we have to build. We know what people are willing to pay money for. We know what features people care about. So now we can go from searching for all answers to all these questions to executing on this idea. Now we can start ramping up our sales organizations, our marketing efforts, because we know what we're selling. We know who we're selling to. We know where we're building the product, what people care about. And that's where we start seeing, we can start focusing on scale. Make sense? But it's not easy, right? This entrepreneurial journey is hard. It is a roller coaster. Sometimes we're super happy, super excited, things are working, people are using our products, and then other times the investors will leave us, the customers will quit using our product, we don't know what's going on, and that's just part of the journey. If it was easy, everyone would do it, and there wouldn't be an opportunity. So the lean startup process is a systematic approach to eliminating this uncertainty through validated learning. We set out with an initial hypothesis about who the customers are, what the problem is they care about, what solution, what features might solve this problem for these people. We start learning as much as possible about these customers. We get new ideas, and then we build what we call a minimum viable product, an MVP. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is and what that looks like. But an MVP is essentially an experiment that allows you as a founder or as a founding team to test the riskiest assumption about your business with the least effort. I'll say that again. An MVP is an experiment that allows you to test the riskiest assumption on your business with the least effort. And you build this MVP might be an early prototype, and it has to be ugly. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, said, if you're not embarrassed about the first version of your product, you shipped too late. Right? You waited too long to show this to customers. You need to show it to customers now so that you can learn that they hate it and what they want instead of wasting time building something no one wants. Right? So you build that MVP, you send it out to customers, you get data. Some aspects they like, some aspects they hate. You learn about that, you come up with new ideas, you build a new MVP, and you go through this iterated process as quickly as possible. Every time you learn something new, every time you get closer and closer to product market fit. And in that process, you're going to pivot a number of times. A fancy word for changing direction. Right? So in a startup, we pivot strategically based on what we learn, and we get closer and closer to product market fit.
Can you show the product to your customers too early in that it's so kludgy that they
No.
don't have the ability to look beyond its problems, and they can't conceptualize to just see what it really can do?
Yeah, no, so the people you're talking to at this point are early adopters. And there are people who have a problem, they realize they have a problem, and they're desperate for a solution. So these people will be your best friends in this early product development process, where they're willing to sit down with you and work on your crappy prototype and test it out because they really want a solution to this product. But if you are a well-established corporation, right, you might not want to use the Microsoft brand on this new crappy app that you send out to blast out to a billion users, right? Because that will damage your brand. But if you're a scrappy little startup, having 10, 15, 50, 100 early adopters that help you in this early stages of the product development process, they are okay using this product. And what you do as a founder is that you put on a little badge called beta on your product, and then you can get away with everything. Right? So you call this is not a real final product. This is a beta version of the product. It has bugs. It will crash. It's not pretty, but it's a starting point. And we want to co-create this with you, and you get to be part of this. And in exchange for being part of this, you will get 50% discount for the product for the rest of your life, or whatever it might be. Right? But you are sort of co-developing and co-creating with those early adopters in the beginning. And they are willing to accept that it's buggy, it's crappy, it's not polished.
Just got a quick one, and maybe it's slightly off topic, but like if you're creating the initial prototype, and say if it's very technological, involved, and you need like some experts, like IT expert or something, to help you build it. I mean, I always just think, like, when they just kind of just
take
the
it
idea and just build it themselves,
like, yeah.
How do you make sure that they'll keep working with you, but they've got all the skills to do it?
Yeah. So it turns out, it's a good question, and a lot of people are very concerned about this whole idea that somebody's going to steal your idea, right? But it turns out ideas are worthless. Execution is what matters, right? And most of these developers that you hire for a project, they could work on so many other things. And you probably don't have the foundation for the next YouTube right here. If you're hiring a developer to build a prototype for you, you're paying them for their time, and that's how they are currently operating. So if they have just a little bit of integrity, and if they ever want to be in business again with other clients, you typically also make them sign maybe an NDA or sign a non-compete agreement, something like that. There are ways of sort of protecting yourself from that. Typically, it's not even necessary. It's one of the things that people have figured out in Silicon Valley, that ideas are not really worth anything. It just takes so much time and effort to make this product come to life. And it's not just building the product, it's also figuring out, setting up the right partners, monetizing it, bringing it to market, doing marketing, and all those different things. So just having the product doesn't mean you have a business. So of course there can be examples. I mean, you saw The Social Network, right, with Mark Zuckerberg, who ended up sort of stealing the idea in a way, right? So if you find some really sneaky developer and you give him the entire plan for launching this product, of course it can happen if you don't protect yourself, right? So ideally, at that point, you would have to do it, but it's very rare that people would just steal an idea when you hire somebody to build it for you. But ideally, in a startup team, you have skills in-house to build the product, right? Also, if you were looking to attract investor and attract VC funding, they would not typically invest in a solo, non-technical founder. Right? They want to invest in a team that can actually build it. So my best advice to non-technical founders is to find a technical co-founder. Find a CTO that can help you build this product. Because otherwise it's going to be really expensive to build it if you're going to hire external talent for it. And there's also that risk. Right? So
if you're a one-man band,
hypothetically,
and you're a technical founder, but because you're a one-man band, you want to do all the other things as well.
Yeah.
Do you recommend it not outsourcing the technical stuff, where you can sort of challenge and question and guide the technical direction?
So if you are a technical,
yes,
then find a non-technical biz hustler to potentially complement you if you need it, right? But there are technical solo founders that have a better shot at making it than non-technical solo founders, right? Depending on the business.
Yeah.
But yeah. But again, you might want to just go a little bit as if you are a technical solo founder, you can sort of build the MVP and start doing some of that testing, preliminary testing, before you hire or find a hustler or a non-technical co-founder. And you might also be able to get away with, instead of inviting a co-founder, then getting the first employee instead, right? And hire salespeople, marketing people, if that's what you need. You might not need a co-founder to take care of the business side of the business. But yeah, but founding teams of 2 or 3 people typically make it better than solopreneurs, because you could just make so much more progress so much faster. So yes, statistics just show that 2 or 3 people in the founding team is much stronger. So it's much better just to solve one specific problem for one specific customer segment with one specific feature. And if you can do that and you succeed in that space, congratulations. Now you can start expanding, adding more features, and attacking other customer segments as well. But less is more. So what is an MVP? A minimum viable product. A version of the product that allows you to test the riskiest assumption with the least effort. A MVP is not necessarily a beta version of the product. Okay. An MVP can be anything, but it is whatever allows you to test the riskiest assumption with the least effort. So maybe building an MVP, a somewhat functional version of the product, a beta version is not the best way to test this. Maybe it's by having a little video illustrating the functionality of the product. Or maybe it's a PowerPoint deck. Maybe it's simply a cartoon, or whatever it might be. There can be many different ways of testing the riskiest assumption. If your riskiest assumption is whether people would, whether you'll be able to market to the right segment and whether they would react to an ad. Say, we have this idea for an intelligent bracelet that can track your heart rate whenever you get stressed and then send you an alert. Good. Well, why don't we try to sell it before we build it? The riskiest assumption at this point is not whether we can build it. The riskiest assumption is, will people buy it? So our MVP in this case could be a Facebook ad. Say like, I'm going to spend 20 bucks or I'm going to spend 50 bucks on a Facebook ads campaign just to see if I put this in front of 20 to 28-year-old women in Melbourne, would they even click on an ad that said cool bracelet that tracks your heart rate, that will make you healthier and feel good and avoid being stressed, or whatever it might be, right? So you sort of test your marketing messaging, your marketing message, before you even have the product. Because the riskiest assumption is not can we build it, the riskiest assumption is can we attract potential customers. And if no one clicks on your damn ad, then you might not have a business. It might become really difficult to get customers. There will be no difference between whether you had actually had the product ready to ship or now. Right? So that's why we try to conduct these experiments where we try to sell it before you build it.
Can you be up for false advertising? We start putting front of product?
No, because you're not charging people's credit cards. I'll get back to how you can do this in a second with a couple of more examples. No, people will get to this and then you tell them, we're actually not ready to ship yet, but you'll be the first ones to know about it when we're ready, and you're going to get a 20% discount. Right? And people are like, bummer. But the purpose here was not for you to get some pre-sales. The purpose was to get the data. So typically, when in any kind of startup, we, after having talked to hundreds of startups, we sort of try to figure out, well, there is a sort of a pattern in the riskiest assumption that you have. The number one riskiest assumption that you typically have is, can you find people trying to solve the problem? Right? That have a problem and they know they have a problem, they're trying to solve it. Secondly, do they want your help solving it? That's another risky assumption. Will they pay you to solve it? What do we call a business without a revenue model? A hobby. That's right. It's fine to have a hobby, but then call it what it is. Right? So we need to figure out, can we make money? And then at the fourth level, that's when we start asking ourselves, okay, great. There are people who want our help solving this problem. They're willing to pay for it. Let's now look into, can we solve it? But there's no point in focusing on this before the other things. Because you can really get caught up in this stuff, and that will take you some time. And then you waste a year trying to figure out, can we solve it? And then you realize that there's no point solving it because nobody wants to pay you money for it. And then, can we scale it lastly? Okay, there are different ways of testing these things, and I'll just go briefly over some of these more advanced ways of testing. Yes?
Would we be able to get the slides?
Yes. Testing. First level is customer interviews. That is the absolute #1 best way of getting insights about customers, is to do qualitative interviews. It's better to do 20 in-person hour-long interviews than it is to send out a survey to 2,000 people. Right? You're going to get more insights in these interviews if you're able to structure the interviews in the right way. Where you interviewing is an art form, and I'll give you an interviewing script later today as well, so you have some extra access to tips and tricks on how to structure your customer interview. But it's easy to sort of structure the interview or ask the questions in a way where the respondent, the interviewee, will tell you exactly what you want to hear. Right? It's very easy to ask the wrong type of questions, so you don't get reliable data. Yes?
How, with the customer, how would you actually find the interviewees? Like the people to interview.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you grab random people off the street,
Yeah,
and
that won't
they may
work.
not, you know, they probably won't be the people who's trying to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. If you look back at the canvas, we're looking at, well, first of all, we need to define who are our customers, or the adopters.
Yeah.
That's who we want to talk to. And in the beginning, we don't know who they are. So we go out and we talk to 20 people. And after 20 conversations, we should see a pattern emerging. Ideally, when we have people with the same characteristics, they should all have this type of problem and be affected by it in somewhat the same way and looking for the same thing. If that's not the case, then one of two things could be wrong. Either the problem you're trying to address is not an actual problem, or you're targeting the wrong customer segment. Either you're too broad, or you're simply narrow but in the wrong segment. So you need to then pivot your customer segment. That's another type of pivot, right? You're not necessarily even pivoting the product or the idea or anything like that. You're just pivoting customer segment. So yeah, it's a big part of the early sort of startup process to find out who are we targeting and how do we reach those people. But you're absolutely right. There's no point in talking to random strangers or calling out your mom or anything like that, because unless that person is specifically in your customer segment, the answers that they will give you are completely irrelevant. So only talk to relevant people. So interviewing first, and when we have validated the problem hypothesis and the solution hypothesis, then we can start taking out, well, okay, great. Can we actually get customers at a reasonable price point? Right, so one of the really critical metrics in any startup is your customer acquisition cost. What is the cost for you to get one new customer? And that number has to be lower than the lifetime value per customer. So we're not going to have time to go really detailed into startup metrics today, but if that is something you want to hear more about, you can email me and I'll try to send you some resources on that. Great. So we can start doing ads now. So we can, for example, put a Facebook ad, see how many people that will click on it, and then we can put up what we call a landing page. So a simple website that describes the product as if it already exists. So we're trying to sell it before we build it here. So we're trying to put together a professional-looking website. And I have another seminar coming up next week. Is it, Daisy? It must be on Monday or Tuesday about how to create a beautiful website in 60 minutes.
One in Geelong, one in Burwood.
Yeah.
26th is the one in Geelong and the one in Burwood.
On the 2nd?
Yes.
I think so. So next Tuesday, if you're interested in learning about how to create a beautiful website in 60 minutes, and what we call a landing page, then sign up for that one. But you sign up essentially the landing page and then start, and you can then manually create a manual solution as well. So Different ways of testing product market fit. The first one is interviewing. We don't have time for this video, but there's a problem interview where you're simply trying to validate the problem. You don't talk about the solution at all, just trying to learn about the problem, the way the problem is affecting users. You don't talk about solution. And then the next level, when you have validated that this is actually a problem to this group of people, then we move into solution interview. In solution interview, you're still not trying to sell. And what's really important when you do any kind of interviewing with customers, that you don't come across as a salesperson. Because what is the first thing we do when salespeople approach us? Like, go away, right? I don't want to talk to you. No, I'm really busy right now. No, I'm not interested, right? So don't come across as a salesperson. The first thing I do when I conduct customer interviews is that, hi, my name is Henrik. I'm trying to learn about this type of problem. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm hoping to find a good solution for it. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I would love if I could buy you coffee and just pick your brain, get some of your insights as to how this problem is affecting your life. So I will be able to develop the right kind of solution for this later down the line. But actually clarify specifically, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm here to learn. I'm here to get your help, get your insights. People love to help entrepreneurs. Right? If they feel like you're helping, if they not feel like they're being sold something. Right? So make sure to come across as somebody who's here to learn. So solution interview is where you can then go into a demo. You can describe the type of product you have in mind, but again, without trying to sell anything. The next level, when we got the insights from the interviews, is a pre-selling. So when we're trying to do pre-sales, we're trying to test, for example, the price point that people are willing to pay, or that people are willing to pay at all. And a good example of this is also called a currency test, is Dropbox and Drew Houston and his team. When they started Dropbox, this was of course very a risky assumption that people wanted a type of service that could back up your documents in the cloud and instantly synchronize between different platforms. And as you can imagine, it was very expensive. It would be very expensive to build this tool. So instead of trying to build it first and then find out that no one wanted to use it, he started by conducting a currency test where he tested whether people would use it. And he did this by creating a cool little demo video that illustrated the functionality of Dropbox, but without having built anything in the backend. Right? He just basically hacked together a cool little demo video of what this might look like later on down the line. And then he published that into different hacker forums. And then he got 70,000 people to sign up overnight with their email address and said, I want this right now. Please send it to me. I want to sign up whenever it's ready. I want to pay anything for it. Just give it to me. Right? And that was enough to validate that there is a need. And then he could go back to investors and say, hey, it seems like there's a big interest in this. Should we try to give it a shot? How about you give me $200,000 for 5% of this company, and I'm going to try to build it. Like, okay, I don't know what the valuation was back then, but anyway, they built it. Another example of how to do pre-sales of a product that doesn't yet exist is through crowdfunding. Right? So all these different companies are now putting together a cool little video and a marketing campaign on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and then they have people actually buy the product before it exists. And what they're interested in here when they're doing a crowdfunding campaign is, of course, a little bit of funding. And what's really good about this type of funding? Yeah, it's not equity based. Right? So you're not giving away anything, any control of your company, but you're still getting the cash and getting the liquidity. So it's great for your cash flow, and it's great for preserving equity. So great examples of how you can raise up to, Pebble raised $10 million right before they had built a product. It's pretty wild. Great. Simulation. The last level of testing is where you try to actually provide the type of service you have in mind, but without building a product for it, without building the whole backend. And a good example of how you can fake it till you make it is how Zappos, you know Zappos? Sell shoes online. What was the big, maybe it's not here yet, but what was the big, any of you bought shoes online? No, not huge. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. So what is the big risky assumption about starting a shoe selling business online? You can't try the shoes. And it's a huge pain in the butt, right? If you order a pair of shoes, they don't fit, now you need to pay for shipping to return them. What is that going to work like? So Tony Scheel and the team at Zappos came up with this idea. Well, what if we eliminate that risk from the customer side and say like, well, in the box, when you receive a pair of Zappos shoes, there's a return label inside. All you need to do is put that return label back on the box and we'll come pick it up for free. Okay, interesting. But they needed to test this. And they didn't want to buy $200,000 worth of shoes and have all this huge inventory if nobody wanted to buy it. So they went down to the local shoe store and they said, hey, to the store manager, would it be okay if I take pictures of the shoes here in your store? And they're like, that sounds weird. Well, if I take pictures of the shoes and I put them up on a website, and then if anyone wants to buy them, I'll come down here, pay full price for the shoes, and send them to the customers. And he was like, yeah, okay, no risk in that. Might actually get a couple of extra sales, so fine. So that's what they did. They went down, took pictures of the shoes, put it on the website, and made them available in different colors, different sizes, without having any inventory, without having any kind of staff to do customer support or shipping service or anything like that. And of course, they wouldn't be able to handle thousands of orders, but they could handle 50 or 100 orders. So what happened was somebody filled out the email formula and said, hey, I want those black Nikes in size 10.5. Great. And then he went down to the shoe store, ordered those shoes, put them in a box, send them off to the customer, and send them an invoice. Right? When the customers called customer support, Tony would pick up the phone. He's like, yes, this is Zappos customer service. Tony, how can I help you? Right? They had no idea they're talking to the CEO of the company. And at the time, he was not, well, he was still actually a pretty sophisticated entrepreneur. He already sold a business for $250 million. But it's just a great way for them to get this invaluable data about how it is to interact with customers. What is the percentage of these shoes that get returned? Right? What kind of concerns do people have? How much do they call customer support? How can we help them? So they were able to actually completely fake it and kind of pretend that they had a huge online business, but really what they had is just that they would go down and just buy them from other stores. So that's a way to start really lean without taking a lot of risk, right? And there are many types of businesses that can do this manual simulation without actually taking on a lot of risk. And then lastly, we get into split testing. So this is something we'll touch upon for those of you interested in landing pages and experiments. Eventually, you need to start doing very effective tests to test the price point, to test the right channels, to test the marketing copy. All of those things in a business has to be tested. So today, we relied on actual data, not just assumptions about what kind of people would buy, what they will pay for it. Today, most startups are very data-driven, and we do these kind of A/B tests, also called split testing experiments, to get the right price point, to get the right marketing messaging, to get the right delivery systems, all that stuff. And that we'll touch on next Tuesday for those of you who are interested. For those of you who can't come next Tuesday, you can go to tinyurl.com/60launch. And in here, my good friend Justin Wilcox with Customer Dev Labs has created instructions on how to create a beautiful landing page in an hour, including a payment processing engine and including a demo video and the landing page itself. You can actually set that up for free in 60 minutes. It's pretty awesome. So play around with that and check it out. Yes.
I was going to ask just quickly before, when you're talking about Zappos, how did he fund because was he originally charging no tax, or was he charging tax, or like how do you originally fund buying the shoes, giving them to a customer, shipping costs? It originally cost him money.
Yeah, but not that much, right?
So he just kept funding that himself to begin with.
I mean, he already made $250 million, so he could easily pay that up. But it wasn't that much money. You and I could afford that too. Yeah. Right? Not for thousands of customers, but for a couple of hundred. Okay. It's a pretty cheap way to get started. Yeah. So of course, what he was doing there, he was doing tons of A/B testing. Yeah. He was looking, well, when I spend X amount of money on Google AdWords, when people type in shoes or online shoes or Nike shoes or whatever he was trying to optimize for, what does it cost me to acquire a new customer? Right? So what is the click-through rate that people come to my website? How many of them actually buy? And that's what we can do when we start conducting these split tests. We can see on our landing page, out of the people who go to our landing page, so we can, when we spend $100 in Google AdWords, how many people do we actually get to our website? And what is the percentage of those websites who actually pay for a pair of shoes? How much money do they spend? Do they come back? Do they refer their friends? All that stuff we need to know. And we can learn a lot about customer behavior even in a small experiment. Yeah. Pitch your startup. I don't have time to go through a lot of that today. Whenever you're pitching your startup, follow this structure. Then you're almost halfway there. Always start with the problem. People don't care about your solution unless they get excited about the problem you're solving. So start by getting the audience hooked by talking about the problem you're solving, how this is a problem, how people are affected by this pain. Then they would want to hear about your solution. Then you talk about the solution, the key features, what makes it unique, what makes it valuable, what is the market size, and what market go-to-market are you addressing, what is your business model, how are you making money, and what is your team, right? So investors more than anything care about your team. They don't invest in ideas because the idea will change. They invest in your team. Good. These are some of the best books I've come across. We talked about The Lean Startup. We talked about The Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank. Tony from Zappos and other companies talks about delivering happiness in this awesome book. There's a book called Startup of You that helps you sort of navigate successfully through life as a startup company. Business Model Generation talks about the business model canvas and then ways to innovate around your business model. Slicing Pie is an excellent framework to divide equity amongst co-founders. So one of the really tricky things about starting a company is how we're going to divide equity in the early days before it's set in stone when you actually create a cap table. When you raise funding, you need to sort of formalize it. But Slicing Pie allows you a sort of flexible framework that tracks how much time you put into your company, and then it divides the equity based on that. One really important thing to note in relation to equity distribution is that you need to put together a co-founder agreement with a vesting schedule. So a vesting schedule is a way to protect yourself and the company. So you don't own your 20% of the company on day one, you earn it back over a 4-year period. Okay? So just before you put anything down on paper with your co-founders, talk to an experienced startup lawyer, get a co-founder agreement and a vesting schedule. There are also templates online, but just don't mess this up because it's going to be pretty expensive to untangle that later. Yeah, rework, founders at work, more sort of just inspirational frameworks. Choose your job you love and you'll never have to live a day in your life. It's been a really pleasure working with you today. Thanks for testing out these tools and hearing about this startup journey. Here is my information, my LinkedIn, my email. At startupexperience.com/resources, you can find a link to these slides plus a lot of other goodies. So go there and check that out. If any of you are interested in a one-on-one session with me, then you can book me at scheel.youcanbook.me. There are a couple of dates still available. So you can book me in like 30-minute slots. I will be here, I think, Monday, Tuesday next week. So that's possible. Otherwise, thanks a lot for your attention today, guys. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.